There are passionate pioneers who inspire, inform, and transform us, helping us be our best selves and live better lives. I want you to meet them. Recently, I spent time with Linda Kohanov, who discovered in the language of horses how they can teach us to communicate more effectively, have healthier relationships, and be stronger leaders.
In 1997, I started what would become eventually Eponaquest Worldwide, which at that time was a collective of regional counselors, educators, horse trainers, people who were really interested in working with horses to help people become better humans. And that's where Eponaquest was started. But it was based on my own experience becoming better adjusted and more effective in the world by working with horses. I couldn't exactly put into words how I was doing that, but people would say, wow, you're really changing, you're really effective. How did you do that with him? How did you shift that relationship? And I would just have to say, well, I was learning some things from the horses that I used, but I didn't know how to put it into words. When you can set boundaries with a 1,000-pound animal, and when you can motivate that animal to move past its fears and past its sometimes not so good or safe ideas for interacting with people, if you can influence horses, then influencing a 200-pound human being is not such a big deal. In the 1990s, a lot of us started noticing that there was emotional and mental benefits to working with horses as well. And so then in the Tucson area, there are a number of innovators in the field that we would now call equine facilitated psychotherapy and also equine facilitated experiential learning. People will say one thing and be feeling and also conveying something non-verbally that might be quite the opposite. And horses actually get very agitated when people are doing that. That's called being incongruent. And when people are incongruent, when they're feeling one thing and portraying one thing non-verbally and actually saying something else and trying to wear a mask of an emotion that's socially acceptable, the horses will get agitated and usually just walk away. And yet when a person becomes congruent, the horse will come back over, even if they're congruent now with an emotion that a human might feel is troublesome. Then they do something that most humans don't do. They get the message behind the emotion. Then they change something in response to that emotion. And then the most brilliant thing of all is they let it go and they go back to grazing, back to enjoying life. Human beings tend to suppress emotion until they explode, then they feel embarrassed, or they just express and express and express, but they never get the message or change something in response. And then they don't let the story go and go back to enjoying life. They hang on to the old stories. And so, yeah, I just felt like the horses gave me the answer to the things that were driving me crazy in the human world.
So at what point did you decide to start working with others?
It's kind of unfolded over years and years, but in 2001, when my first book, The Tao of Equus, came out, it was a sudden international success, and people started coming from around the world to study with me and even saying, can you teach me your techniques for working with horses to help humans? And so my colleagues and I started even doing apprenticeship programs and instructor training programs and developing multiple equine facilitated activities for specific purposes to teach specific skills and bring a certain level of mindfulness and awareness and confidence to people who might be struggling in life, but also people who are functioning at a reasonable level who really need some skills to excel. We have over 300 instructors worldwide who've gone through our training program, and there are a lot of equine facilitated therapy and learning programs around the world. We also have developed a lot of activities over the years that are designed to teach specific things. So it's not just throwing people in with a horse or having them get up on a horse and ride. We actually have very specific activities for teaching very specific things. Or bringing people to a place of mindfulness of what's going on, but giving them a tool to take home with them. A lot of equine facilitated programs will have activities that show people what's happening. And a lot of times what they're showing people are dysfunctions in a group, but they don't give people the tools of what can you do differently.
I think about the first time I went in with Layla, and I was standing there thinking, wow, you are big. You're large, Yeah. And I thought, wow, I haven't been with a horse since I was probably really in this type setting, like since 4th grade. And the most interesting thing in the end was her deciding to give me a hug in the end before I left her presence the first time I was with her, and how that felt, to have that kind of acceptance and without halter, without lead, without anything, to have been in with her and worked with her. It was just very, very moving for me and affirming.
Psychologists studied human communication and figured out that, only about 10% of what we're communicating to each other is happening at that verbal level. Some of it has to do with vocal tone, but a lot of it's body language, and then even different kinds of emotions they've learned. Emotions are actually contagious. So there are whole dimensions that people are ignoring as they become overly addicted to only paying attention to words. And now, a lot of times, we don't even talk to each other anymore. We're texting each other. So, that's not even, you're not even getting 10% of what could be communicated. You're just getting words on Twitter in short phrases, So what happens is that other 90% is happening, and the nonverbal is happening all the time. People are just ignoring it. And horses will draw attention to what's being communicated in the nonverbal area. And they help you make it conscious, and then they help you learn how to read nonverbal communication coming from others, and then how to do something productive in response to that.
Working with the horses under leadership skills, it helped me see myself. It was a very good teacher and mirror at the same time.
Again, the horses are drawing attention to things that are invisible or unphotographable or nonverbal. You have a hard time putting it into words. And we are all transformed by it together. And so each person who goes in with the horses is having an experience that affects everybody in the group who's sitting outside, holding the space, learning from each other. So when a family comes and does this work together, it's really about your family learning tools for how to use emotions more effectively with each other. What do the emotions mean? How can we use them as information? So we've been studying the effects of various horse activities on the physiological health of people. And we've actually found that just simply grooming a horse for 10 minutes mindfully will increase what's called heart rate variability in a human, which is a measure of heart health. And also, we've seen that grooming any animal for about 10 minutes can actually cause you to release oxytocin, which will buffer the flight and fight response in favor of a calm and connect response. Just from being in the presence of a horse and grooming a horse is significant.
It's getting away from the everyday. It's experiencing the desert here. It's all of it, and the way your staff and your people treat people as well. It's a beautiful experience.
I can't tell you how many people have told me, just driving through the fence onto the property, I burst into tears. Or just driving onto the property, walking up, seeing the horses, I felt this sense of openness and peacefulness, and I just could settle into myself, So it is the setting that barns provide in the presence of horses that in itself has a healing benefit. Many times I've had deeply spiritual experiences with the horses. Even among people who don't normally think of themselves as interested in horses, it's really a journey of accessing and invigorating your soul and connecting with the spirit of life through the horse.